Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and today I am doing a special video where I'm going to be talking about how to plan on more of a day-to-day basis using astrology and specifically using the energy of the moon and the lunar cycles. And so this is a request that I get a lot from people, and this is a question that I get a lot from people, is sort of how to plan projects and activities and events based on astrology. And so for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be explaining just very basic electional astrology techniques utilizing the phases and alignments of the moon, because, you know, on a more day-to-day sort of everyday level, we are a lot more easily able to work with the energy of the moon because it changes signs. It's constantly moving. You know, it spends only 2.5 days in each sign before it moves on, whereas the bigger planetary aspects that are going on, that's something that we can't necessarily control on a day-to-day basis or like a week-to-week basis so much, right? And so even when we have really difficult astrology going on, like a difficult aspect that's going on maybe out, you know, out in the skies, difficult planetary aspects that are going on in transit out there, or if we have difficult transits going on to planets in our birth chart, you know, we still have to usually continue doing the same normal day-to-day stuff for the most part, right? So we still have to go to work, we still have to plan our projects, we still have to have those emails, communications with other people, you know, we still have to continue functioning. And so the best way to sort of plan around this energy is going to be to utilize the moon, right? And so this is not a technique necessarily for bigger sorts of events. You know, when we're considering something like a wedding or like launching a business, or, you know, some other more common thing that people might want to get an electional chart done for, we're going to be looking to really maximize all of the planetary aspects and alignments. And we're also going to be looking at where we're going to put the ascendant and the midheaven and all the different houses of the chart and the planets in the houses. So that's going to be a much more complicated scenario, right? So this is not necessarily a video that's going to help you plan big events. It's just going to help you to plan more on a day-to-day basis and more on a smaller scale, right? If you're going to be planning a big event like a wedding, I mean, this can help you to learn how to utilize the moon and the lunar energy appropriately, right? And the phases of the moon and what moon signs are going to be best for you personally. But for big events, I do recommend looking at the whole picture, and I do recommend getting professional help if you can. If not from me, then from somebody else. And I do offer electional charts, you know, for events and things like that. You can find the link to, you know, book a reading or to get a chart done for, you know, a business opening or whatever it is that you're looking to do in the description of the video down below. But anyway, so this is going to be more about planning on a day-to-day basis, planning your weeks, your months, you know, talking about how you can utilize the energy of the moon in order to do this. And so the first step here, of course, is going to be you need a way to track the moon, right? What is the moon doing right now in the skies? And so I recommend getting some sort of lunar planner or lunar calendar. I would recommend getting one that has all of the astrological aspects so you can keep track of what's going on, bigger picture as well, because that's going to influence what's going on with you, right? So if you have, let's say there's like Pluto squaring the sun, right? And it's happening in the skies, and Pluto happens to be in an exact conjunction with your Venus at the exact same time. This is going to be a lot of intensity, a lot of power struggles. You know, your interactions with people are going to be quite intense. This is not, so using the moon in an appropriate way is not going to override that energy. You still need to be aware of that energy, right? So you need to be able to be aware of all the different planetary alignments as much as you can in order to make the best use. But in terms of the moon, you can get different like lunar calendars, lunar planners. The one that I really like is called We Moon, and you can pick this up online, I believe. This is, I got this from a little shop called Crystal Magic in Sedona. This is the 2018 version. The 2019 version is already out, and I love this calendar because this is my notes for all of my forecasts are in here. This is how I track and plan, you know, for when I'm going to do different promotions or, you know, do different webinars and events, or, you know, just planning my daily life and my social life and things like that. Like, when is going to be a good day to do that thing with that guy, you know? But yeah, so it shows for each day, if you guys can see this here, I'm going to try to make it so you can see it. It shows every single day all of the different planetary aspects that are coming exact A lot of these last for longer than just one day, right? And it shows all the lunar aspects, the lunar cycles, all of that. So this is a really good calendar, but you're going to need to know how to read like astrological symbolism in order to utilize this calendar appropriately, because it is written in like glyphs and things like that. I also have a big lunar calendar that I keep here in my office that has like, it's just like a normal calendar, but it has the phases of the moon and the aspects in a very similar way, but just not as detailed as this one. So there's a lot of different options. And I have a friend actually who is really great with astrology, who's creating a more simplistic lunar calendar. So, you know, if that happens and when that happens for 2019, I'll probably post that on my Facebook page. And I also do post electional like updates when there's really good electional astrology. I like to post that about that on Facebook, so that way people can utilize the energy. So if you want to keep up with the good timing for whatever it is that you want to do, I will be posting updates on Facebook. You can find my Facebook page at the link in the description below. And I'm trying to use Instagram too, but I'm not very good with it. But you can follow me there. But anyway, so this is not about my Facebook page, but that's, you know, another way that you can get more information, right? So if you're learning how to do this for yourself, you can, you know, test it against what I'm posting or what other astrologers are saying, right? And you can see if this is good timing. But in terms of, you know, picking good times to do things, right? Just in normal life, there are a few things that you need to look at. So if you want to plan your sort of work cycles and schedules and projects to be in alignment and to work with the lunar cycles instead of against it, there are some very basic rules here. So when the moon is waxing, that's when you're going to want to initiate things. The best time to initiate is just after the new, like 3 to 5 days after the new moon, when you have that waxing crescent, so long as the astrology is appropriate, right? But pretty much any time between the new moon all the way up until the full moon, like that middle ground there, that's going to be a time for initiation, for starting new projects, for putting things out there, for growing something, for seeding anything that you want to continue to grow, right? Because the moon is still growing to its fullness. Anything that you want to wrap up and let go of, that's what you use the waning phase of the moon for. So when you want to tie up loose ends, let go of old projects, that's when you can start winding down. You can start sort of harvesting the fruits of your labors from the first half of that month, right? It's time to turn inward, time to sort of, you know, like I said, wind down, right? So winding up is what you do during the new moon phase, and winding down is what you do during the waxing moon, or the waning moon phase. So waxing moon is for growth and expansion and seeding things that you want to grow, and seeding things that you want to let go of too. That's another thing you can use the waning moon for. So say you want to, you know, wrap up a project that you don't want to deal with anymore. Say you want to end a relationship or a friendship. Or you want to like pay off some debts. Like these are all things that you could utilize the waning moon more appropriately for. And so building things up at the start of the month and then sort of following up with that and finishing things out as the moon wanes, that's sort of the natural ebb and flow of our energy, especially for women. Women are very deeply connected to the lunar cycles, and that's something I'm going to be bringing on a special guest hopefully soon to speak about. But you know, our energy ebbs and flows with the phases of the moon, and that's based on not just the lunar cycles that are going on in the skies, but the the alignments, you know, in our birth chart as well, and where the moon is in relationship to the birth chart, which is something we're going to talk about here. But the first thing you want to look at is lunar phase, right? So beginning projects when the moon is waxing, if you want them to grow, winding things down during the waning moon phase. And I'm also providing in the description of the video below an article, a link to an article I wrote. It's not really an article, it's just kind of like a guide where I talk about the different lunar phases and what each one represents, as well as the different moon signs. So when the moon is transiting each sign, what you can sort of expect with energetically, how that energy of the moon is going to be filtered through the lens of the sign that it's moving through, right? And so that's something to take into consideration as well. So how does the sign work with the energy of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So earth signs are going to be better for more practical, grounded, real sorts of tasks. So, you know, dealing with finances, dealing with money, dealing with, you know, doing something very physical in a very practical way, dealing with health issues, dealing with business, you know, that type of stuff is going to be appropriate for the earth signs. And the earth signs, if you're not already familiar, are Taurus, Virgo and Capricorn. You know, the water signs are going to be more creative, more intuitive. That's going to be a good time to sort of turn inward. That's going to be a really good time to do things that are more creative. That's a good time to sort of connect with your emotions and intuition a little bit more. Do some journaling, spend some time, you know, doing those types of activities that are going to sort of enhance your creativity. And it's going to help you to get in touch with how you feel about things. It's going to help you to get more in touch with your intuition during these times. And during certain phases, well, in general, when the moon is in water signs, people tend to be a little bit more emotional. You know, moon in Cancer, right? That's a very emotional, like very deeply feeling sign. Moon in Pisces is very empathic. It's very difficult to sort of understand the boundaries between your emotions and the emotions of other people when you're, you know, when you have a natal moon in Pisces. But when you're in the midst of the Pisces moon, the interconnectedness becomes more prevalent. And then Scorpio, obviously, moon in Scorpio, people are going to have a little bit more of an intense emotional experience, just kind of in general under the Scorpio moon, right? Because the moon is at its fall in Scorpio. And so that's a placement where, you know, our emotions are really intense, but we're less willing to express them because we feel more sensitive to betrayal. We feel a little bit more paranoid about letting things out and letting people in when the moon is in Scorpio. So that's kind of like the nature of the water signs, right? So it's more about emotions and feeling and intuition and a little bit of creativity as well. The moon in the air signs is going to be better for communication. So like emails, text messages, phone calls, writing, you know, doing things via the internet, especially with moon in Aquarius, doing things that are a little bit more innovative and rebellious with the moon in Aquarius, right? Moon in Libra is great for connecting one-on-one with people. And moon in Gemini is great for socializing in general, right? Because that's a very social, socially adaptable sign. And then when we look at what we did earth, fire, that's the one we missed. So the fire signs are really good for doing things that are very active, initiating action, right? Being active physically. You know, it's going to be a time when you're going to have potentially a lot more energy. Really, it depends on what's going on in your birth chart. So you need to have an understanding of your birth chart to really, really utilize that energy. But, you know, in general, moon in the fire signs, you're more passionate, much more energetic, much more active. It's a good time to initiate action, to do things, right, out in the world. And so that's kind of the nature of having the moon transiting the fire signs, which are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So Aries is really great for initiating and focusing on your needs, your self-interest. People are going to be a little bit more self-involved under that moon sign anyway, and also very passionate. Moon in Leo, it can be a little overly dramatic in emotional expression, right? But that's a good time to do something where you want to get recognition, where you want to, or doing something that's very generous, very authentic, where you're sharing your heart with other people, doing something romantic or playful, right? Moon in Sagittarius is going to be better for doing things that are more adventurous, or for doing things involving higher education, learning, travel, especially long distance travel, philosophy, like looking at your moral and ethical values and belief systems, these types of things, right? So the Sagittarian, pretty stereotypical energy. But the way that, so that's kind of the moon going through the signs, right? But what you want to really look at if you're going to pick a time to do something is what aspects are the moon making at the time that you're doing it, because that's going to indicate how the actual thing that you're doing is probably going to play out. And then the other thing that you really want to look at with the moon is the last aspect that the moon is going to make before it goes void of course. And so the last aspect that the moon makes before it goes void of course is the last aspect the moon makes in a sign before it transits into the next sign, before it changes signs. And so an example of that would be, I have like a weird day opened right now, like this coming Monday, right? So this coming Monday, October 15th, you might be watching this way at a different time. There's going to be, the moon is actually going to be in Capricorn, which is really good for, you know, business related activities. It's going to be in sextile with Mercury and Venus, which is really great for communication and connecting with other people. Also, it's going to be there's going to be a conjunction between Mercury and Venus on that day too, which again is really good for really harmonious, really balanced and well-received communication. And then the moon will make another sextile to Neptune, which makes people more compassionate, right? Much more loving, more empathic, even in that sort of stern, cold sign of Capricorn. And so this is a good day for connecting with other people, especially for business, right? Very literal. That's like on the most basic, most simplistic level. That's what you could say about this day. The one thing, so then the next thing you have to look at after that is sort of what is the last aspect the moon's going to be making before it changes signs. So on Tuesday, the 16th, the moon will be moving into, or the moon will still be in the sign of Capricorn, but it'll be making more difficult aspects. So there could be some complications or delays from what you initiated, on that Monday when you had all these really nice aspects. So the thing that you initiate will probably go really well then, assuming there's nothing crazy going on in your birth chart, right? Because you also have to take into consideration that. So if you have Pluto in a conjunction with your natal Venus, while you have all these harmonious aspects, it's going to help to make things a little easier for you, but it's not going to negate the fact that Pluto's on your Venus. So your connections with people might be a little bit more intense. There might be power struggles. There might be difficulties. You might be undergoing some sort of crisis in your relationships. But that Monday vibe with all of the beautiful energy with Venus and Mercury, that should soften it, right? And make it a little bit better. So even though you're going through all of that, there's something making it a little nicer. And then in terms of the daily energy at least. But yeah, so the lunar aspects don't overpower the planetary aspects. So definitely keep that in mind. This is just very basic and very general for like planning your week, right? But so you want to look at the last aspect that the moon makes before it goes void, of course. And so the last aspect that it makes on Tuesday is going to be a sextile to Jupiter, which indicates, that the end results of whatever it is that you set forth and put into motion on Monday are likely to be, they're likely to expand on something, to grow your business if that's what you're working on, to grow your relationships with people, especially business-related relationships or practical relationships in some sort of way. It's likely to be beneficial, right? Jupiter is the great benefic. Sextile to Jupiter is a good sign, a good aspect. And then when the moon goes void, of course, that's another thing to kind of touch on, is that when the moon is void, of course, this indicates that it's not really doing anything. It's just kind of like in this void. It's just like floating around, because under normal circumstances, the moon is constantly in aspect with something. It's like always making aspects with other planets because it moves so quickly. Like I mentioned before, the moon spends only 2.5 days in each sign before it transits to the next sign. And so the moon's always in motion. It's always connecting with the other planets. It's what's kind of keeping things going all the time. It's rules the rhythms and the cycles of our day-to-day life. And so that's why, getting in tune with these rhythms can be useful for us, right? So we can be in tune with that lunar energy so we can utilize it in the best possible way. But so when the moon is void, that indicates that there's no aspects being made between the moon and other planets from the moment it goes void, of course, until the moment it moves into the next sign. So the example that I was using on October 16th, the moon goes void, of course, at 2:49 p.m. After that time and all the way until 12:36 a.m. on Wednesday, like in the middle of the night, that's a time when it's not good to initiate anything. Anything that you initiate during the void, of course, moon is not likely to pan out. And I've seen this happen time and time again. Even if you really think it will, it's usually, it fizzles out, right? There's not a lot of energy behind the moon. It's not doing a lot of stuff. So this is a really good time for you to sort of kick back, relax, spend some time in introspection, reflection, contemplation, right? Turn inward. That's the best thing to do when the moon is changing signs, when the moon is void, of course. It's a really good time for mundane tasks. It's a really good time for brainstorming, planning, and just honestly just taking breaks, right? So you can plan your time, your downtime, if you're able, if you're lucky enough to be able to do things like that, or even when you're working in a normal office environment, like plan that time for scheduling and rearranging things and reflecting and, organizing your desk or whatever it is that you need to do, just normal tasks and things like that, brainstorming about a big project, sending, routine communications and emails is usually okay. But if you're starting like a big project or if you're sending a really important email to like your boss or something like that, you don't want to do it during a void moon because it's not likely to pan out. It's usually going to fizzle out. The other thing that's good about the void moons is that usually when you're really worried about something, it doesn't end up mattering. So that's the nice thing about the void moon. So if you're really worried about something and how it's going to work out or whatever it is, and you look and you're like, oh, it's a void moon right now, you know, you probably don't need to worry about it so much. I don't know what that was. Sorry. But yeah, so that's kind of the nature of, you know, the void moon phases. So look at the lunar phase, look at the alignments between the moon and the other planets, so the aspects that it's making. So you'll need some sort of lunar calendar for this. Maybe I'll make one someday. I always wanted to, but it just, you know, it hasn't happened. It's a very time consuming sort of thing. And there's people that make really good ones. So I don't need to make one anymore. But yeah, so look, and then the next thing that you need to do is look at what the moon is doing in your chart. And that's going to be the best way to sort of plan the energy, right? So looking at the moon through the houses in your birth chart. So for that, you're going to need to understand the house system, at least to a certain extent, or be able to see where the houses are and what sign is ruling each house in your chart. But when the moon is transiting through your first house, that's a really good time when all eyes will be on you, right? That's a good time to be seen, to be recognized, to do things that are a little bit more self-serving, that benefit your own self-interest. You know, that's kind of like the nature of the moon in the first house. You know, moon in the first house and maybe a sign that rules beauty, like Taurus or Cancer, and making really positive aspects to Venus in the skies or something like that could be a nice time to get a haircut or, you know, buy some new clothes or something like that. So first house is anything that benefits the body, anything that serves your own self-interest, anything that puts you in the spotlight. Usually people tend to feel like good and more energized when the moon is in their first house. So when the moon is transiting your first house, I know for me personally, when the moon is in Scorpio, I'm a Scorpio rising, I actually feel like really fired up and really, you know, ready. Like I usually have more energy and I'm a lot more intense during that time. And so, you know, that's kind of the nature of having the moon. So you have to look at how it's going to be expressed, right, through the sign, but also looking at what house it's in. So usually you feel a little bit more lit up when you have the moon in the first house. When the moon is in the second house, this is a good time for initiating things that have to do with finances, right? So, you know, you can, and it's probably going to be something that's going to be happening anyway. So like when the moon is transiting your second house, financial stuff will be coming up for you. So, you know, you might as well utilize that and focus on it, right? And so anything that has to do with finances, budgeting, spending, you know, saving, the way that you create resources, if you want to sort of market a product or something like that, the moon in the second house, for, especially if it's, again, you have to look at the aspects it's making. If the moon is in the second house, conjunct your natal Saturn and squaring a bunch of stuff in the sky, that's maybe not a good time for finances. Maybe don't spend that money, right? You know, maybe wait a little while or, you know, take some time to think about that purchase you're going to make. But if it's, I'm talking about if this is positive aspects going on here at the same time, if you've already checked the aspects the moon is making, you check the last aspect that the moon is going to make, and, you know, that's the time that you're going to go apply for the loan or something like that, which is maybe a little bit more of a bigger thing. So look at some of the planetary aspects. But anyway, so the second house is finance. The third house is the house that rules communication. So you're already probably going to be thinking a lot more, communicating a lot more. You might be, you know, traveling around in your sort of immediate environment and neighborhood, running a lot more errands, communicating with your neighbors, with your community. And so that's a good time to do that, right? So running errands, sending emails, text messages, you know, making those phone calls that are important, doing that marketing that you wanted to do, sending out that email campaign, whatever it is that you want to do that involves communication, marketing, even like for learning, like smaller skills, right? So if you want to, you know, take a webinar that day or sign up for a webinar or something like that, or sign up for like a course, or, you know, go take a different, like if you normally go to some sort of like exercise class, you go take a different class this day, right? So that's something that you could do, and that would be beneficial. In the fourth house, the moon in the fourth house shifts the focus to more your home and your family. So that's a good time to, you know, take care of your home, take care of your property, take care of your family, clean your house, rearrange some stuff, spend time, you know, with your husband and your children, or, you know, whoever you live with, spend time with your parents, call your mom, right? Those are all good things to do when the moon is transiting your fourth house, especially if it's making nice aspects. If making difficult aspects, you know, maybe you're probably going to have to deal with some family stuff, but just kind of know that, you know, if there's something important, maybe wait until next time around. The fifth house is the house of play, fun, you know, self-expression through creativity, through your passions, through the things that you love to do. And so this is a good time to play. It's a good time to do things that are more fun. It's a good time to engage in your hobbies, your interests, your passions. You're probably going to feel a little bit more optimistic and lit up with the moon in the fifth house too, because it's activating the house of fun, right? It's activating the house that connects you with your inner child. It also rules children. So if there's something you want to do or initiate, or a project involving children, or if you have children, this is a really great time to play with them, right? Spend some extra time with your kids when you have the moon in the fifth house. That's a really nice thing that you can do with that energy. It's also the house that rules romance. So if you're like planning a first date, you know, that's a good time to do it, is when the moon is in your fifth house, especially if you want it to go well, if you want to have fun. If you want to have that romantic, passionate connection, that can help, right? It's not a guarantee, but it can help. There's a lot of things that go into that, but it's definitely, you know, useful to plan around something like that. If you want to go out to a party, a concert, you know, those types of things, go out to a restaurant, those are all fifth house sorts of activities. The sixth house is the house of work, right? It's the house of your day-to-day routines. That's a house where when the moon is transiting that house, it's a good time to take care of routine tasks. It's a good time to like take care of your health. Go buy some more supplements, order that, you know, thing on Amazon that you were going to get, that like supplement or that herb or whatever it is that you need for your health. Go to the doctor, right? That's a good thing. You can, if you have a doctor's appointment, or you want to make a doctor's appointment and you're kind of nervous about it, or it's important to you for whatever reason, moon in the sixth house, unless you're having surgery, that's a different thing. This is not an electoral surgery video. But yeah, so moon in the sixth house can be a nice time to do those types of things and to take care of those types of things. When in the seventh house, you're going to be focusing a little bit more on relationship, on your connections through marriage, partnership, things of that nature. So, you know, that's a good time for that. And so anything that you want to do involving contracts, agreements, one-on-one relationships, if you just want to connect with your spouse, you know, have a nice evening in or a nice evening out, that's something that is, you know, favorable to do with the moon in the seventh house. Moon in the eighth house, you're dealing with debt, power struggles, other people's money. This is a really good time for like really intense introspection or research. It's a good time to, if you do have debts, a lot of times they'll come up and they'll be like calling you or emailing you, or you'll get that like letter in the mail with the red letters on it. You'll get that when the moon is in the eighth house. It tends to time out weirdly like that. So that's just kind of something to be, I guess, aware of. But that's a time to deal with it, right? It's a time to deal with things that feel scary, that feel disempowering, to face your fears, but to deal with things involving joint finances, debt, other people's money, introspection. That's also a deep healing house. It's a house that heals you from the inside out on that emotional and psychological level. So it is a good time to spend time separated from other people, which might be what you're feeling like doing when the moon is in the eighth house anyway. But yeah, it's really good to really immerse yourself in your passions, to focus on, you know, researching something, getting to the bottom of some sort of something that's been like bothering you. And it's a really good time to face your fears, right? And to do things that feel a little bit empowering. And, you know, solitary work is probably better with that eighth house energy. Although, you know, you could do things, it's good for intimacy. So that's another thing that it's good for as well. Moon in the ninth house, you know, you might be thinking big picture, broader perspective. It's a good time for learning. It's a good time for exploring new philosophies. It's a good time for big projects. It rules publishing. It rules higher education. It rules connecting with people from foreign countries, even if you're not actually going to those foreign countries. That's something that's associated with the ninth house as well. Connecting with teachers, like learning new skills, thinking, pondering your ethical values and moral philosophies, right? So thinking about what in travel, right? Travel plans. So if you want to, plan for travel, moon in the ninth house, if the moon is doing nice stuff, that is always, a good bet, a safe bet. Moon in the 10th house is you're going to be probably focusing more on your career and your public reputation and what you're doing out in the world. And so that's kind of bigger picture career stuff. And so that's a time to think about where you're headed, to put something out there. If you want to put something out there in the world where you're going to be recognized for it through your work, that's a time when you can do that a little bit more easily. I know that I always get busier around the few days that the moon is on my midheaven, right, in Leo. That just happens to be the case, right? And so you might already just be busier with work. People are going to be seeing you and valuing you a little bit more, recognizing you out in the world, recognizing your talents and gifts, assuming the moon is doing nice stuff. The moon in the moon in the 11th house is a really good time to connect with your friends, your social networks, the people that you choose to spend time with. And that could even be things like clubs, organizations, groups of people. That could be a really good time to connect with people via the internet or via technology. That could be a really good time to engage in some sort of charitable or humanitarian type of cause, and to connect with a group in that sort of way, to give back, right? That's part of the 11th house as well. But, that's a really good time to socialize, to go out with friends, to connect with the people that you surround yourself with by choice. That's the 11th house. And then, going into the 12th house, moon in the 12th house is usually a time when you kind of want to pull inward a little bit. It's a good time to rest a little bit more, take a nap, spend less time out in the public, just chill, wind down a little bit. Don't overdo it when the moon is in the 12th house. But it's a really great time for dreams, for, getting really important information and downloads through your dreams, through meditation, through visualizations, through visions and impressions. Your intuition will be much stronger. But, it's a more reflective time, and it's more of a time to sort of pull inward. It's a really great time for creativity, though. So if you do anything that's deeply creative, this is a time when you might be your creative processes might be turned on a little bit more. And so spending time away from the world, resting, that's a good thing to do when you have the moon transiting the 12th house. So anyway, so that's the moon going through the houses, so you can kind of get a general feel for that. Again, this is sort of on a basic level. There's a lot more that goes on to this for the bigger picture stuff and the bigger events. But on a day-to-day basis, you can kind of look at this and see how it flows in your own life, see how your energy waxes and wanes with the phases of the moon and with the signs as it transits your chart. You can see what happens when the moon hits different planets each month. Keep track of these things. If you have a planner like this, you could use it as a journal and just write down interesting events that happen on different days and see how it matches up, right? So, everybody is a little bit unique because everybody has their own chart that's, aligned in its own way. And so I think the best way to utilize the energy is to follow that chart and follow the flow of that chart and how the moon interacts with it, along with the way that it's interacting with what's going on the outside. So, I think both are important. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. The only other sort of consideration that I would say is to never start or initiate something important within 3 days of an eclipse, just because it's probably not going to turn out the way that you want it to. It'll usually turn out the way that it needs to, though. But if you really have your heart set on something being a certain way, it usually sort of flops and changes when you initiate something near an eclipse. And I've seen this happen in a big way many times in my life. So I've learned about that. And usually it's not necessarily that it's going to be horrible. It's just not going to be what you want or what you're planning. But usually the end result can be better, especially if it's a North Node eclipse or something like that, because it's destiny, it's fate that's stepping in, that's changing things up for you, that's realigning you in the right direction. But if you're planning something and you want it to be a certain way, that's probably not the time to do it. So if you're kind of more controlling over what you're doing, which, if it's an important project and you've been working really hard on it, then you should be, right? So that's kind of the other thing that you kind of have to be aware of during the eclipse seasons, especially the eclipse cycles. But other than that, so I hope this was helpful to you guys. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you want me to do more videos like this, I can totally do that. Maybe we'll even do a webinar or something. And like I said before, the link to book a reading or to get an electional chart for a bigger event, which is a more complicated issue, is in the description of the video below. I also have a link included down here for the article that I've written, or the sort of guide I've written for the moon and the signs and the moon and the different sort of phases and cycles. And so you have that as a little bit of a reference. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And yeah, bye.